I remember my childhood as a time of contrasts. While most kids complained about their parents working too much, I had to listen to my mom's daily litany about how she hated her job. Every evening was the same. She'd come home from the accounting firm, throw her bag on the kitchen counter, and start venting. "Amanda, you won't believe what my boss said today," she'd begin, barely taking off her coat. "He had the nerve to question my quarterly reports." Me. I'd been doing this job for 15 years. I was only 10 at the time, but even then, I could see how different my parents were. Dad, who managed a retail chain, would just shake his head and keep eating his dinner. He was always the practical one. "Sarah," he'd say to Mom, using his calm voice that somehow made her even more agitated, "if you hate it so much, find another job." "Another job?" she'd scoff. "I don't want another job, Mark. I want no job. I want to be home, living the life I deserve." Dad would usually chuckle at this point, which never failed to send Mom into a fresh spiral of complaints. "You think it's funny? You think it's amusing that your wife is miserable?" I learned to tune out these conversations, focusing instead on whatever book I was reading or homework I had to finish. But everything changed when we got that call about Uncle Jerry. I still remember that evening clearly. Dad was unusually quiet during dinner, and Mom was going through her usual routine of complaints when he finally interrupted her. "Jerry died," he said simply, putting down his fork. Mom stopped mid-sentence. "Your Uncle Jerry? Was there, did he leave anything?" Dad sighed heavily. "He left his estate to his nephews. I'm one of them." Mom's fork clattered against her plate. "How much?" $200,000. The silence that followed was deafening. I watched my mother's face transform, the perpetual frown lines smoothed out, her eyes widened, and a smile I'd never seen before spread across her face. "Mark," she whispered, reaching across the table to grab his hand, "do you know what this means? We could buy that vacation house I've been talking about, or—" "No," Dad cut her off firmly. "Remember all those times you said you wanted to be free? Well, here's our chance. I'm going to start my own business." "A business?" Mom's voice rose an octave. "But Mark—" "A courier company," he continued as if she hadn't spoken. "I've been researching it for years. With this capital, we could make it work. You could quit your job and help me run it. We'd be our own bosses." Mom's face went through a series of expressions: disappointment, calculation, and finally, resignation mixed with hope. "Fine," she said eventually. "But I get to be the accountant. And when we start making money, I want nice things, Mark. Real nice things." Dad smiled and squeezed her hand. "Deal." The first 3 years were tough. Dad worked crazy hours getting his courier company off the ground, while Mom handled the books. I spent a lot of time at the office after school, watching them build something from nothing. Despite the long hours, there was an energy in the air, a sense of possibility that made even the difficult days feel worthwhile. Then, almost exactly 3 years in, everything changed. The business started turning real profit, and suddenly we were living a completely different life. We moved from our modest house to a fancy new place in the expensive part of town. Dad bought 2 Mercedes for himself and Mom. But the biggest change wasn't in our surroundings, it was in my mother. "I'm done," she announced one morning over breakfast. "Mark, I'm quitting the company. I don't want to work anymore." Dad just nodded, like he'd been expecting this. "Okay, honey. We can hire another accountant." I nearly choked on my cereal. "Just like that?" "Just like that," Mom smiled, already scrolling through her phone. "Oh look, Melissa just got back from Paris. I should call her." Melissa was one of Mom's new friends, all wealthy businesswomen who spent their days shopping and planning their next vacation. Her old friends, the ones who'd been around when we were normal, started disappearing from her life one by one. While Mom was reinventing herself, I started spending more time with Dad at the office. I tried to learn about the business, thinking maybe I'd take over someday, but my heart wasn't in it. "Dad," I said one afternoon, watching him review delivery routes, "what if I told you I don't want to run the company when I grow up? I think I want to be a dentist." Instead of looking disappointed, his face lit up. "Really? Tell me more about that." So I did. I told him about the biology classes I loved, about how fascinating I found dental procedures, about my dream of having my own practice someday. He listened to everything, asking questions and showing genuine interest. Meanwhile, Mom was barely home anymore. She was always off somewhere, Aspen, Cabo, the Maldives, with her new friends. I lost count of how many times I asked to go with her. "Mom, can I come on your trip to Europe next month?" I asked one day, watching her pack another new suitcase. She didn't even look up. "Oh honey, no. These trips are my time to get away from, well, everything. When you're older, you'll realize how exhausting family life can be." I wanted to point out that she didn't actually participate in family life anymore, she was too busy recovering from it. But I just walked away. What was the point? The mother who used to help me with homework and make chocolate chip pancakes on Sundays was gone, replaced by this stranger who cared more about her designer handbags than her daughter. High school graduation came and went, and before I knew it, I was packing my bags for dental school in another state. Dad helped me move into my dorm, setting up my room with the same careful attention he gave to everything in his life. Mom didn't come to help me move in. She was in the Bahamas with her friends, celebrating someone's new yacht. Every Sunday at 7 p.m., I'd call home. Dad would appear on screen immediately, eager to hear about my classes, my friends, my life. He'd lean in close to the camera, hanging on every word about dental procedures and anatomy lessons. Mom, when she bothered to join the calls, would hover in the background, usually scrolling through her phone. It became our routine. Sometimes Mom wouldn't show up at all, and those were actually my favorite calls, just Dad and me, talking about everything and nothing. Then came the call that changed everything. "Amanda," Dad's voice was different that Sunday. "I need to tell you something." I knew from his tone that whatever was coming wasn't good. But nothing could have prepared me for what he said next. "It's cancer. And it's aggressive." The world tilted on its axis. "What? No, that's impossible. You're healthy, you." 6 months, maybe less, he cut me off gently. "I'm selling the company. Neither you nor your mother could run it, and I want everything settled before." He couldn't finish the sentence. He didn't need to. Those 6 months were a blur. I tried to split my time between school and home, watching helplessly as my father, my rock, my best friend, withered away before my eyes. He sold the company quickly, thank God, so at least he didn't have to worry about that in his final weeks. Mom fluttered around during his illness, playing the part of the devoted wife whenever anyone was watching. But I caught the calculating look she'd give his medication schedule, the way she'd check his business papers when she thought no one was looking. A month after selling the company, Dad slipped away quietly in his sleep. I was holding his hand when it happened. Mom was at a spa. The funeral was a production worthy of Broadway. Mom sobbed dramatically, clutching at the arms of her friends, barely able to stand. She looked the perfect picture of a grieving widow in her designer black dress and tastefully subtle makeup. But the moment the last guest left, it was like someone had flipped a switch. She straightened up, wiped her eyes, and walked to the mirror to fix her mascara. "Well," she said, suddenly businesslike, "that's done. Now we need to talk about the money." I stared at her, unable to process the transformation. "Mom, Dad just died." "I know, honey, and it's terrible," she said, not sounding terrible at all. "But life goes on. And just think what we could do with the money from the company sale. I've had my eye on this gorgeous villa in Spain." Then there was the reading of the will. The notary's office was cold and sterile, nothing like Dad's warm presence. Mom sat next to me in a black designer dress, different from the funeral one, of course, tapping her manicured nails against her leather handbag. Mr. Peterson, Dad's longtime lawyer and friend, cleared his throat and began reading. Being of sound mind. His voice droned on with the legal preliminaries until he got to the meat of it. The family house is to be divided equally between my wife, Sarah Thompson, and my daughter, Amanda Thompson. Mom's tapping stopped. Furthermore, I have established a trust fund for Amanda's continued education in dentistry, covering all expenses until the completion of her degree. I could feel Mom's tension building beside me. The remaining assets, including proceeds from the sale of the business, are to be divided as follows: 60% to my daughter, Amanda Thompson, and 40% to my wife, Sarah Thompson. The tapping resumed, faster now, almost violent. "This is ridiculous," Mom burst out before Mr. Peterson could continue. "There must be some mistake." "There's no mistake, Mrs. Thompson," Mr. Peterson said quietly. Mark was very clear about his wishes. Mom turned to me, her face a mask of calculated sympathy. "Amanda, honey, you have to see how unfair this is. Your education is already being paid for, and you'll make plenty of money once you're a dentist. I'm your mother, I need this money to maintain my lifestyle. Maybe try spending less?" The words came out before I could stop them. Her face transformed instantly, the sympathetic mask dropping away to reveal raw fury. "How dare you? After everything I've sacrificed for you?" "What exactly have you sacrificed, Mom? You haven't worked in years. You've been on permanent vacation while Dad built everything we have. I don't have to listen to this." She stood up, gathering her designer purse and jacket. "When you decide to stop being selfish and ungrateful, you know where to find me." The door slammed behind her with enough force to rattle the diplomas on Mr. Peterson's wall. "Your father knew this might happen," Mr. Peterson said gently. "He wanted to make sure you were taken care of." Days turned into weeks. No calls, no texts, no emails. The silence was deafening, but also strangely peaceful. I threw myself into my studies, trying to make Dad proud, trying not to think about Mom's reaction or what it said about her, about us. "She'll get over it," I told myself as I reviewed dental anatomy charts late at night. "She'll calm down eventually." But deep down, I knew something had broken in that notary's office, something that had been cracking for years. And unlike the broken bones and damaged teeth I was learning to fix in school, this wasn't something that could be mended with study or skill or science. One day I was taking a study break, mindlessly scrolling through social media, when I saw it. At first, my brain couldn't process what I was looking at: Mom, tanned and glowing, wrapped in the arms of a man who couldn't be more than 35. The caption beneath the photo stopped my heart: "Finally married to my soulmate. Newlyweds, love wins." My phone slipped from my numb fingers. "Married? Without telling me?" I tried calling her immediately, my hands shaking so badly I could barely hit the right numbers. Straight to voicemail, of course. That night, I couldn't sleep. The image of them together kept playing in my head, along with 1,000 questions. By morning, I'd made up my mind. I packed a small bag and caught the first flight home. The house looked exactly the same as when I'd left it after the funeral, Dad's rosebushes still perfectly trimmed, his favorite chair visible through the living room window. The only difference was the shiny red Porsche in the driveway that definitely hadn't been there before. Mom opened the door wearing a silk robe I'd never seen before. Her surprised expression quickly turned to anger. "Amanda, what are you doing here?" Her voice was ice cold. "I saw your post," I managed to say. "You got married?" "No one invited you here," she snapped, but before she could close the door, a man appeared behind her, the one from the photo. Up close, he looked even younger. "Babe, who is it?" he asked, wrapping an arm around her waist. "Nobody important," Mom replied. "Just my daughter who doesn't know how to call before showing up." I felt like I'd been slapped. "Your daughter who didn't even know you got married?" "My personal life is none of your business," she said, lifting her chin defiantly. "None of my... Mom, Dad's only been gone 3 months." She laughed then, a harsh sound that held no humor. "Oh, sweetie, Brad and I have known each other for years. Why do you think I took all those solo vacations? Those trips were boring. Brad made them very interesting, didn't you, darling? He smirked, pulling her closer. I felt sick. How could you do this to Dad? My voice was barely a whisper. Your father was boring, she shot back. Always work, work, work. Brad knows how to have fun. Now, I suggest you leave before I call the police. This is my house now, and you're not welcome here. This is half my house, I reminded her. Dad left it to both of us. Get out, she screamed, her composed facade cracking. Get out of my house. Go back to your precious studies and your perfect little life that your father bought you. I backed away, tears blurring my vision. The last thing I saw before the door slammed was Brad pulling Mom into a kiss, both of them laughing. I made it to my rental car before the sobs came. All those trips, all those times she said she needed breaks from the family. How long had she been living this double life? How long had she been betraying Dad, betraying all of us? Another month has passed. I was in the middle of a dental anatomy class when my phone buzzed. Mrs. Jenkins, our old neighbor who'd lived next door for 15 years, was calling. Odd, she never called. Amanda, honey, her voice was hesitant. I thought you should know, there are moving trucks at your house. Your mother is selling it. The words didn't make sense at first. That's impossible. The house is half mine. Well, there's a sold sign in the yard, and they're clearing everything out. My hands were shaking as I dialed Mom's number, expecting the usual silence. To my surprise, she answered on the first ring. Well, if it isn't my studious daughter. Her voice dripped with sarcasm. Mom, what's this about selling the house? She laughed, a sound that sent chills down my spine. Oh, that. Yes, Brad and I got a fantastic price for it. We're moving to Mexico, the weather's so much better there. You can't sell the house, I said, trying to keep my voice steady. It's half mine. Dad left it to both of us. Funny thing about that, she said, sounding almost gleeful. It turns out it's pretty easy to forge a signature. Just a few practice runs, and voila. The house is sold. The world tilted sideways. You forged my signature? Mom, that's fraud. That's a crime. Oh please, she scoffed. If you hadn't been so selfish with your father's money, I wouldn't have had to do this. Brad and I deserve to enjoy life. Speaking of which, I just bought him the most gorgeous Jaguar. He's so happy with it. He's happy with your money, Mom. That's all he cares about. You little brat, she spat. You're just jealous, because I have a gorgeous young husband who adores me, while you're all alone with your boring books and your little dental tools. What do you know about love? I know Dad loved you, I said quietly. He loved you for 30 years, and this is how you repay him? Your father? She laughed again, harsher this time. Your precious father, who left you more money than me. Who treated me like I was some kind of trophy wife. Well, now I have a real trophy, a young, handsome husband who knows how to have fun. And guess what? We don't care about your American laws in Mexico. We don't care about you, or your inheritance, or anything else. We're going to live the life I deserve. Mom, please. Face it, Amanda. You're just a sad, lonely little girl who's jealous of her mother's happiness. When was the last time you even had a date? Too busy playing with teeth to have a real life, aren't you? Before I could respond, the line went dead. I sat there in the empty classroom, my phone still pressed to my ear, listening to the silence. My mother had just admitted to committing fraud. She had stolen my inheritance, my home, everything I had left of Dad. And she was proud of it. Life has a funny way of moving forward, with or without you. In the years following Mom's disappearance to Mexico, I finished dental school, completed my residency, and started working at a respected clinic. Dad's inheritance helped me buy a beautiful apartment in a quiet neighborhood, and I was building the life I'd always dreamed of. I thought about Mom sometimes, usually late at night when I couldn't sleep. I wondered if she was happy with her choices, if her young husband was worth destroying her family for. But mostly, I tried not to think about her at all. Then one ordinary Tuesday evening, as I was unwinding after a long day at the clinic, my doorbell rang. I wasn't prepared for what I saw through the peephole. There stood my mother, but not the perfectly coiffed, designer-clad woman I remembered. This woman was haggard, wearing wrinkled clothes that had seen better days. Her once immaculate hair was graying at the roots, and her expensive makeup was nowhere to be seen. Against my better judgment, I opened the door. "Amanda," she whispered, her eyes filling with tears. "Baby, please. What are you doing here?" My voice came out harder than I expected. She pushed past me into the apartment, her eyes darting around desperately. "I need your help, Brad, she choked back a sob. "He took everything." "Everything?" I couldn't help the hint of satisfaction in my voice. "All the money, the house money, what was left of the inheritance. He spent it all on gambling and parties in Mexico. And then..." She wrapped her arms around herself. "Then he met some 20-year-old at a club. They ran off together. Took the Jaguar, took what little money was left." I stood there, watching her cry, feeling nothing but satisfaction. "I used my last dollars to fly back here," she continued. "Amanda, I know I made mistakes, but I'm your mother. Let me stay here with you, please." A laugh bubbled up from somewhere deep inside me, surprising us both. "Stay here? With me? Why are you laughing?" Her face darkened. "This isn't funny. I have nowhere else to go." "Maybe you should have thought about that before you forged my signature and stole my house," I said, my laughter dying away. "I was wrong," she wailed, falling onto my couch. "I know that now. I'm sorry. Please, Amanda, I'm your mother." "No," I said quietly. "You stopped being my mother the day Dad died. Maybe even before that. I want you to leave." She shot to her feet, tears instantly replaced by rage. "You ungrateful little bitch. After everything I've done for you." "Everything you've done to me," I corrected. "Now get out." "You can't do this to me," she screamed, mascara running down her cheeks. "I'll tell everyone what a horrible daughter you are. I'll tell them how you left your poor mother homeless. What will your fancy doctor friends think about that?" As my mother's threats echoed through my apartment, I calmly pulled out my phone. Sometimes the best weapons aren't weapons at all, they're just the truth, preserved at the right moment. "Before you continue with your threats," I said quietly, "there's something you should hear." I pressed play, and her own voice filled the room, younger, more confident, dripping with that familiar mockery from years ago. "Oh please. If you hadn't been so selfish with your father's money, I wouldn't have had to do this. It turns out it's pretty easy to forge a signature. Just a few practice runs, and voila. The house is sold." The color drained from my mother's face as she listened to her past self confess to fraud. Her legs gave out, and she sank back onto my couch. You recorded that call?" "Dad taught me to always be prepared," I said, stopping the playback. "He also taught me about consequences, something you never seem to understand." "You wouldn't," she whispered, but the uncertainty in her voice was clear. "Wouldn't I? Fraud is a federal crime, Mom. Forging documents for financial gain? That's years in prison. I'm sure the police would be very interested in this recording." She stared at me, and for the first time I saw real fear in her eyes. Not manipulation, not calculation, genuine fear. "I'll leave," she said quickly. "I'll go. Just, don't." "Don't what? Turn you in? Like you were just threatening to turn everyone against me?" I leaned closer. "Here's what's going to happen. You're going to walk out that door, and you're never going to contact me again. No calls, no visits, no messages through friends. If I ever hear from you again, this recording goes straight to the FBI." She stood on shaky legs, clutching her worn purse to her chest. At the door, she turned back one last time. "Amanda, I'm still your mother. No, I said softly. You're just a woman who gave birth to me. My mother died a long time ago, probably around the time she started cheating on my father at those resorts. She flinched as if I'd slapped her, then hurried out the door. I stood there for a long time after she left, listening to the silence of my apartment. Then I walked to my bedroom and pulled out an old photo album, one of the few things I'd managed to save before she sold the house. There was a picture of us from when I was little, Mom, Dad, and me at the beach, all smiling, all happy. I touched Dad's face gently. I miss you, I whispered. Then I closed the album and put it away. I don't know what happened to my mother after that day. I don't know if she found somewhere to live, if she ever rebuilt her life, if she ever truly regretted what she'd done. Sometimes people ask about her, and I simply say we're not in touch. The truth is, I don't want to know. The woman in that photo album, the mother who once loved me, is gone. The stranger who showed up at my door that day? She's not my problem anymore.
We've talked about this. We both agreed that we wanted to focus on our careers first. Has that changed for you? He shrugged, not meeting my eyes. I don't know, maybe. It's just, seeing Michael with his new baby, it makes me wonder what we're waiting for. I felt a pang in my chest at the mention of my brother's newborn. The image of Michael's beaming face as he cradled his daughter flashed through my mind. I get it, I said softly, but we're not Michael and Sarah. We have different goals, different timelines, and right now I'm not ready to give up everything I've worked for. Ben nodded, but I could see the disappointment in his eyes. He leaned down to kiss my forehead. I'm going to take a shower, he murmured before heading to the bathroom. I sighed, leaning back into the couch cushions. As I shifted, something hard poked into my thigh. Frowning, I reached between the cushions and pulled out a small glittering object. An earring. A delicate gold hoop with a tiny diamond charm. My heart stopped. It wasn't mine. I turned the earring over in my palm, a cold feeling settling in the pit of my stomach. Where had this come from, and more importantly, who did it belong to? The sound of the shower running suddenly seemed very far away as I stared at the unfamiliar piece of jewelry, my mind racing with possibilities I didn't want to consider. The shrill cry of a newborn pierced the air, and I felt my heart constrict. My brother Michael beamed with pride as he cradled his tiny daughter Emma in his arms. "Want to hold her, Abby?" he asked, his eyes shining. I hesitated, then nodded, carefully taking the bundle into my arms. Emma's warmth seeped into me, and I felt an unexpected longing bloom in my chest. "She's beautiful," I whispered, gently rocking her. "You're a natural," Sarah, Michael's wife, said with a smile. "When are you and Ben going to join the parent club?" I forced a laugh, handing Emma back to Michael. "Oh, you know us, career-focused as always." But as I watched my brother and his wife coo over their daughter, I felt a shift inside me. Maybe it was time to reconsider our priorities. Later that night, I found Ben in his home office, hunched over his laptop. "Hey," I said softly, perching on the edge of his desk. "Can we talk?" He looked up, surprised. "Sure, what's up?" I took a deep breath. Seeing Michael with Emma today, it got me thinking. Maybe we should start trying for a baby. Ben's eyes widened. "Really? I thought you wanted to wait." "I did, but..." I hesitated. "I don't know, something's changed. What do you think?" To my surprise, Ben's face lit up. "Abby, I've been wanting this for a while now. I just didn't want to pressure you." I blinked, taken aback. "You have? Why didn't you say anything?" He shrugged, looking sheepish. "I know how important your career is to you. I didn't want to be like my mother, constantly nagging about grandchildren." I laughed, feeling a weight lift off my shoulders. "Oh, Ben, we really need to work on our communication." He stood up, pulling me into his arms. "So, we're really doing this? We're going to try for a baby?" I nodded, a mix of excitement and nervousness bubbling up inside me. "Yeah, we are." The next few months were a whirlwind of ovulation tracking, prenatal vitamins, and carefully timed encounters. We threw ourselves into the process with the same determination we applied to our careers. But as weeks turned into months with no positive pregnancy test, the initial excitement began to wane. The pressure mounted, turning our once passionate lovemaking into a scheduled chore. "Maybe we're trying too hard," Ben suggested one night as I tossed another negative test into the trash. I sighed, collapsing onto the bed. "Maybe. Or maybe there's something wrong with one of us." Ben sat beside me, taking my hand. "Let's give it a few more months. If nothing happens, we can see a specialist." I nodded, trying to ignore the gnawing worry in my gut. As we approached the 1-year mark of trying, the strain began to show in other areas of our lives. Work became a welcome distraction, and I threw myself into a big project, often staying late at the office. One evening, I came home to find Ben waiting for me, a serious expression on his face. "Abby, we need to talk," he said, his voice tight. My heart raced. "What's wrong?" He ran a hand through his hair, looking frustrated. "I feel like we're drifting apart. This baby thing, it's consuming us. Maybe we should take a break from trying." I felt a surge of anger. "A break? After all this time and effort, we can't just give up, Ben." "I'm not saying give up," he said, his voice rising. "I'm saying we need to focus on us for a while. When was the last time we had a conversation that wasn't about ovulation or pregnancy tests?" I opened my mouth to argue, then closed it again. He had a point. "Fine," I said, deflating. "What do you suggest? Let's go out tomorrow night. No baby talk, no work talk, just us." I nodded, forcing a smile. "Okay, that sounds nice." But as I headed to the bathroom to get ready for bed, I couldn't shake the feeling that something fundamental had shifted between us. The earring I'd found months ago flashed in my mind, and a cold tendril of doubt curled around my heart. What if there was more to Ben's suggestion than he was letting on? The sterile smell of the fertility clinic made my stomach churn as Ben and I sat in the waiting room. After a year of trying, we'd finally decided to seek professional help. The tension between us was palpable, each of us lost in our own thoughts. Abigail and Benjamin, a nurse called our names, jolting us back to reality. We followed her to a small office where Dr. Patel, a kind-faced woman in her 50s, greeted us with a warm smile. "So you've been trying for a year without success," she said, reviewing our file. "Let's start with some basic tests to see what we're dealing with." The next few weeks were a blur of blood draws, ultrasounds, and uncomfortable procedures. Ben and I barely spoke during this time, the strain of our situation weighing heavily on us. Finally, we found ourselves back in Dr. Patel's office, awaiting the results. "Well," she began, her expression neutral, "we found some issues that could be contributing to your difficulty conceiving." My heart raced as she explained the findings. Low sperm count for Ben, potential endometriosis for me. It felt like a punch to the gut. "What are our options?" Ben asked, his voice tight. Dr. Patel outlined various treatments from medication to IVF. My head spun as she spoke, the reality of our situation sinking in. As we left the clinic, Ben turned to me. "I have a late meeting. Will you be okay getting home?" I nodded, too numb to argue. Watching him walk away, I felt more alone than ever. That evening, I found myself at my parents' house, seeking comfort in my mother's presence. "Oh, honey," Mom said, pulling me into a hug as soon as she saw my face. "What's wrong?" The story spilled out of me, the fertility issues, the growing distance between Ben and me, the mysterious earring I'd found months ago. Mom listened patiently, her brow furrowed with concern. "Abby, have you talked to Ben about how you're feeling? About your suspicions?" I shook my head. "I'm afraid of what I might find out if I push too hard." She took my hands in hers. "Sweetheart, a marriage can't survive on secrets and suspicion. You need to have an honest conversation with Ben." I knew she was right, but the thought of confronting Ben filled me with dread. When I got home that night, I found Ben in the kitchen, nursing a glass of whiskey. "Where have you been?" he asked, his tone accusatory. "At my parents'," I replied, steeling myself for the conversation ahead. "Ben, we need to talk." He sighed, running a hand through his hair. "About what?" "About us. About this distance between us. About," I hesitated, then plunged ahead, "about the earring I found on our couch months ago." Ben's face paled. "What earring?" "Don't play dumb," I snapped, my frustration boiling over. "A gold hoop with a diamond charm. It's not mine, Ben. Whose is it?" He stood up abruptly, his chair scraping against the floor. "You've been sitting on this for months? Suspecting me of what exactly?" "Of cheating," I shouted, tears pricking my eyes. "Of giving up on us." Ben's expression hardened. "That's rich, coming from you. You're the one who's been distant, throwing yourself into work, barely looking at me." We glared at each other, years of unspoken resentment hanging in the air between us. Finally, Ben spoke, his voice low and dangerous. "You want the truth? Fine. I've been offered a promotion. In London." I felt like I'd been slapped. "London? When were you planning on telling me this?" He shrugged, not meeting my eyes. "I don't know. I've been considering my options." The implications of his words hit me like a tidal wave. He'd been making plans. Big, life-changing plans, without me. "Get out," I whispered, my voice shaking with anger and hurt. Ben looked startled. "What?" "Get out," I screamed, grabbing the nearest object, a framed photo of us on our wedding day, and hurling it at him. It shattered against the wall as Ben ducked, glass raining down on the kitchen floor. Without another word, he grabbed his keys and left. the door slamming behind him. I sank to the floor, surrounded by the broken pieces of our life together, wondering how we'd ever put them back together, or if we even should. The days following our explosive fight blurred together. Ben and I danced around each other, the tension thick enough to cut with a knife. We slept in separate rooms, ate at different times, and avoided eye contact when our paths crossed. One evening, as I sat at the kitchen table reviewing work documents, Ben cleared his throat from the doorway. "Abby, we need to talk," he said, his voice uncharacteristically hesitant. I looked up, steeling myself. "About what? Your secret job in London?" He winced. "No, actually, I want us to go out tomorrow night, to Finnegan's pub." I blinked, caught off guard. "Why?" "There's someone I want you to meet," he replied, not quite meeting my eyes. A cold dread settled in my stomach. "Who?" "Her name is Roxy. She's a colleague." The pieces started falling into place. The earring, the late nights at work, the emotional distance. I felt sick. "Fine," I said, my voice flat. "I'll meet your colleague." The next evening, I found myself perched on a bar stool at Finnegan's, nursing a gin and tonic. Ben sat beside me, fidgeting nervously. "There she is," he said suddenly, waving to someone behind me. I turned and felt my world tilt on its axis. A young woman, she couldn't have been more than 25, was walking towards us. She was beautiful, with long blonde hair and sparkling green eyes. But what caught my attention was the slight swell of her belly, barely noticeable under her flowing top. "Abby, this is Roxanne," Ben said, his voice strained. "Roxy, this is my wife, Abigail." Roxy's smile faltered as she looked between us. It's nice to meet you, Abigail. Ben's told me so much about you." I felt like I was watching the scene from outside my body. "Has he now? Funny, he's never mentioned you." An awkward silence fell over us. Ben cleared his throat. "Why don't we sit down?" We moved to a booth, the tension palpable. I watched as Ben unconsciously leaned towards Roxy, his body language screaming intimacy. "So, Roxy," I said, my voice dripping with false sweetness, "how long have you been working with my husband?" She glanced at Ben before answering. "About 8 months now. We're on the same project team." 8 months, I repeated, my mind racing. It all made sense now. The changes in Ben's behavior, the mysterious earring, the growing distance between us. "Abby," Ben started, his voice low and serious. "There's something we need to tell you." I laughed bitterly. "Let me guess. You're in love, and that," I nodded towards Roxy's belly, "is yours." The guilty looks on their faces confirmed my worst fears. "I'm so sorry, Abigail," Roxy said, tears in her eyes. "We never meant for this to happen." "But it did," I spat, my anger rising. "While we were trying for a baby, struggling through fertility treatments, you were off knocking up your little office fling." Ben reached for my hand, but I snatched it away. "Abby, please. I know this is a shock, but—" "A shock?" I stood up, my chair scraping loudly against the floor. "Finding out my husband is a lying, cheating bastard isn't a shock, Ben. It's a goddamn tragedy." Heads were turning in our direction, but I didn't care. Years of frustration and pain were pouring out of me. "So what's your plan?" I demanded. "Move to London with your pregnant mistress? Live happily ever after while I'm left picking up the pieces?" Ben stood up, his face pale. "Abby, I'm sorry, I never wanted to hurt you. But yes, Roxy and we want to be together. I want a divorce." The word hit me like a physical blow. Divorce. The end of our marriage, our dreams, our future. I looked between them. Ben, the man I'd loved for years, and Roxy, the woman who'd stolen him away. In that moment, something inside me hardened. "Fine," I said, my voice cold and steady. "You want a divorce? You've got it. But don't think for a second that I'm going to make this easy for you." With that, I turned and walked out of the bar, leaving my old life behind. As the cool night air hit my face, I realized that this was just the beginning. The real battle was yet to come. The harsh fluorescent lights of the lawyer's office made my head throb as I signed the final divorce papers. Ben sat across from me, his face a mask of guilt and relief. I couldn't bear to look at him. "That's everything," our lawyer, Mr. Thompson, said. "The division of assets is settled, and the alimony payments will begin next month." I nodded, my throat tight. "Is that all?" Mr. Thompson glanced between us. "Unless there's anything else you'd like to discuss?" "No," Ben said quickly. "I think we're done here." As we left the office, Ben reached for my arm. "Abby, I jerked away. "Don't. Just don't." Without another word, I walked away, leaving behind the shattered remains of our marriage. The drive to my parents' house was a blur. I found myself on their doorstep, my suitcase in hand, before I even realized where I was going. Mom opened the door, her eyes widening at the sight of me. "Abby? Honey, what's wrong?" I collapsed into her arms, sobs racking my body. "It's over, Mom. Ben and we're divorced." She ushered me inside, calling for Dad. They listened in stunned silence as I poured out the whole sordid tale, the affair, the pregnancy, the betrayal. "Oh, sweetheart," Mom said, pulling me close. "I'm so sorry." Dad's face was thunderous. "That no good son of a—" "Henry," Mom warned, but I could see the anger in her eyes too. The next few weeks passed in a haze of grief and anger. I threw myself into work, staying late at the office and bringing projects home. Anything to keep my mind off the gaping hole in my life. One evening, as I sat at my childhood desk reviewing case files, there was a soft knock at the door. "Come in," I called, not looking up. It was my brother, Michael. "Hey, sis, thought you could use some company." I managed a weak smile. "Thanks, but I'm fine." He perched on the edge of the bed, studying me. "You know, it's okay not to be fine, Abby. What you're going through, it's huge." I felt tears prick my eyes and blinked them away furiously. "I just feel so stupid. How did I not see it coming?" Michael sighed. "You trusted him. That's not stupid, Abby. That's love." A sob escaped me, and suddenly I was crying in earnest. Michael moved to sit beside me, wrapping an arm around my shoulders. "Let it out," he murmured. "It's okay to grieve." As my tears subsided, I felt a flicker of something I hadn't experienced in weeks. Hope. "You're right," I said, wiping my eyes. "I need to stop hiding and start healing." The next morning, I woke with a new sense of purpose. I called my boss and took a week off work. Then I booked an appointment with a therapist. As I was getting ready to leave for my first session, the doorbell rang. I opened it to find a courier holding a large envelope. "Delivery for Abigail Carter," he said. I signed for the package and opened it, my heart racing as I recognized the letterhead of the fertility clinic. Inside were the results of our final round of tests, the ones we never got around to discussing before everything fell apart. My eyes scanned the document, widening as I reached the conclusion. According to the results, Ben was the one with fertility issues. Severe ones. The implications hit me like a ton of bricks. If Ben was nearly infertile, how could Roxy be pregnant with his child? My mind raced. Could she have been lying? Was the baby even Ben's? I sank onto the couch, the test results clutched in my trembling hands. This changed everything. For the first time since that fateful night at the bar, I felt a spark of something other than pain and anger. It was a dangerous, thrilling feeling, the desire for revenge. I reached for my phone, my fingers hovering over Ben's number. Should I confront him with this information? Or should I bide my time, waiting for the perfect moment to expose their lies? As I sat there, poised on the precipice of a life-altering decision, I realized that the path I chose now would define not just my future, but the kind of person I wanted to be. The question was, who did I want to be? The wronged wife seeking justice, or the woman who rose above the betrayal to reclaim her life? With a deep breath, I made my choice. The crisp white envelope sat on my kitchen table, mocking me with its innocence. Inside was an invitation to Ben and Roxy's wedding. My hands shook as I read the flowery script, each word a dagger to my heart. "You've got to be kidding me," I muttered, tossing the invitation aside. The audacity of them to invite me, as if we were all still friends, made my blood boil. I paced the room, my mind racing. It had been 6 months since the divorce, and I'd been slowly piecing my life back together. But this threatened to unravel everything. My phone buzzed. It was a text from my friend Sarah. "Did you get it too? Can you believe they're actually inviting people from the office?" I felt a surge of anger. Not only were they flaunting their relationship, but they were doing it in front of all our colleagues. My finger hovered over Ben's number. I was tempted to call him, to scream at him for his insensitivity. But then my eyes fell on the fertility test results, still sitting on my desk where I'd left them months ago. A plan began to form in my mind, dark and tempting. I picked up the phone and dialed a different number. "Dr. Patel? This is Abigail Carter. I need to discuss something with you. It's about my ex-husband's fertility test results." An hour later, I sat in Dr. Tell's office, the test results spread out before us. "You're certain about this?" I asked, my heart pounding. Dr. Patel nodded gravely. "The results are clear, Mrs. Carter. Your ex-husband's sperm count and motility are extremely low. The chances of him fathering a child naturally are less than 1%. I leaned back, letting the information sink in. "And there's no chance of a mistake?" "We ran the tests twice to be sure," she confirmed. "I'm sorry, I know this must be difficult to hear." I laughed bitterly. "You have no idea." As I left the clinic, my mind was whirling with possibilities. Ben was practically infertile, which meant, "The baby isn't his," I whispered to myself, the realization hitting me like a freight train. I drove home in a daze, barely noticing the familiar streets. Once inside, I poured myself a large glass of wine and sank onto the couch, my thoughts a chaotic mess. Part of me wanted to call Ben immediately, to expose Roxy's lie and watch their perfect little world crumble. But another part, a colder, more calculating part, whispered to wait. I pulled out my laptop and began to research. Paternity tests, legal rights, the implications of fraud in a marriage. The more I read, the clearer my path became. Hours passed, and as the first light of dawn crept through my windows, I sat back, a grim smile on my face. I had a plan. I would attend their wedding. I would smile and congratulate them, play the part of the supportive ex-wife. And then, when the time was right, I would reveal the truth and watch their house of cards collapse. But first, I needed proof. Irrefutable evidence that would leave no room for doubt. I picked up my phone and dialed another number. Michael? It's Abby. I need your help with something. How good are you at hacking into medical records? My brother's silence spoke volumes. Abby, what are you planning? I took a deep breath. Something that might destroy lives, including my own. But I can't let them get away with this lie. Will you help me? There was a long pause before Michael sighed. Okay, sis, I'm in. But promise me you'll be careful. This sounds dangerous. As I hung up, I caught sight of my reflection in the mirror. The woman staring back at me was someone I barely recognized. Determined, fierce, maybe even a little frightening. I promise, I whispered to my reflection. But careful isn't going to cut it anymore. It's time to fight fire with fire. I picked up the wedding invitation, running my fingers over the embossed letters. In just a few weeks, I would have my revenge. And nothing, not even my own conscience, was going to stand in my way. The church bells rang out, a mockery of the turmoil churning inside me. I smoothed down my dress, the manila envelope clutched tightly in my hand as I stepped into the reception hall. The room was a sea of smiling faces, all gathered to celebrate the union of Ben and Roxy. My eyes locked onto Ben, handsome in his tuxedo, his arm wrapped around Roxy's waist. Her white gown did little to hide her growing belly. The sight made my stomach lurch. Abby! Laura's shrill voice cut through the crowd. I'm so glad you could make it. I plastered on a smile as Ben's mother approached, her eyes gleaming with a mix of triumph and pity. Wouldn't miss it for the world, I replied, my voice sickly sweet. Laura's gaze dropped to the envelope in my hands. Oh, is that a gift for the happy couple? I tightened my grip. Something like that. As if on cue, Ben and Roxy made their way over, their faces a mask of polite surprise. Abby, Ben said, his voice strained, we're glad you came. Roxy nodded, one hand protectively cradling her stomach. It means a lot to us. I took a deep breath, steeling myself. This was it. The moment I'd been planning for weeks. I have something for you, I said, my voice steady despite the adrenaline coursing through my veins. A wedding gift of sorts. I held out the envelope. Ben took it hesitantly, glancing at Roxy before opening it. What's this? He asked, pulling out the papers inside. Why don't you read it aloud? I suggested, my heart pounding. I'm sure Laura would love to hear it too. Ben's brow furrowed as he began to read. Fertility test results for Benjamin Carter. Sperm count. Motility. His voice trailed off, his face paling. What is it, darling? Laura asked, peering over his shoulder. It says I'm practically infertile, Ben whispered, his eyes wide with shock. Less than 1% chance of fathering a child naturally. The silence that fell over our little group was deafening. Roxy's hand dropped from her stomach, her face a picture of panic. But that's impossible, Laura sputtered. Roxy's pregnant. I turned to Roxy, my voice ice cold. Care to explain that, Roxy? Or should I share the results of the paternity test I had done on your prenatal screening? Roxy's face crumpled. I can explain. But Ben had already taken a step back, his eyes filled with betrayal. You lied to me? The baby. It's not mine. Heads were turning now, the whispers starting to spread through the reception hall. Ben, please, Roxy pleaded, reaching for him. But he jerked away. How could you? He hissed. How could you do this to me? To us? Laura stood frozen, her eyes darting between Ben, Roxy, and me. I don't understand. This can't be happening. I felt a twinge of satisfaction, watching their perfect world crumble. But as I looked at Ben's devastated face, a wave of unexpected emotion washed over me. This was the man I had loved, the man I had planned to spend my life with. And now... I'm sorry, I whispered, not sure who I was apologizing to. Ben, myself, or the universe that had brought us to this moment. The room was in chaos now. Guests were murmuring, some leaving, others openly staring. Roxy had collapsed into a chair, sobbing. Ben stood alone, the test results crumpled in his fist. As I turned to leave, Laura grabbed my arm. Why? She demanded, her voice breaking. Why did you do this? I met her gaze, seeing the pain and confusion in her eyes. Because the truth always comes out, Laura. Always. I walked out of the reception hall, the sounds of confusion and heartbreak fading behind me. The cool night air hit my face and I took a deep, shuddering breath. I had done it, I had my revenge. So why did I feel so empty? As I got into my car, my phone buzzed. It was a message from Michael. Is it done? Are you okay? I stared at the screen, my vision blurring with unexpected tears. Was I okay? I didn't know. I didn't know anything anymore. With trembling fingers, I typed back a single word. Yes. But as I drove away from the shattered remnants of Ben's new life, I couldn't shake the feeling that this wasn't the end. It was just the beginning of something I wasn't sure I was ready to face. 6 months after the wedding disaster, I sat in my office, staring at the email on my screen. My hands trembled as I read it for the 3rd time. Congratulations, Abigail. The board has unanimously decided to promote you to senior partner. A knock at my door startled me. It was Sarah, her eyes wide with excitement. Abby, did you hear about Ben and Roxy? I felt a familiar twist in my gut. What about them? They're divorced. And Ben, he's been demoted. Apparently, the higher-ups felt his personal drama reflected poorly on the firm. I leaned back in my chair, a whirlwind of emotions washing over me. Satisfaction, guilt, and an unexpected pang of sadness. How do you feel about all this? Sarah asked, studying my face. I opened my mouth to respond, but the words wouldn't come. How did I feel? I'd gotten my revenge, hadn't I? So why didn't I feel victorious? I need some air, I muttered, grabbing my coat. Outside, the crisp autumn air cleared my head. I found myself walking to the park where Ben and I used to spend our Sundays. As I sat on our old bench, my phone buzzed. It was Michael. Hey sis, heard about your promotion. Congrats. Want to come over and celebrate? I smiled, picturing my brother with his little family. Thanks, but I think I need some time alone right now. Everything okay? His concern was palpable. I'm not sure. I admitted, I thought I'd feel different after everything. Michael was quiet for a moment. You know, Abby, revenge doesn't heal wounds, it just creates new ones. His words hit me like a punch to the gut. I thanked him and hung up, my mind reeling. As the sun began to set, casting long shadows across the park, I saw a familiar figure approaching. My heart raced as I recognized Ben. He looked older, tired. The confident stride I once knew was gone, replaced by a hesitant shuffle. Abby, he said, surprise evident in his voice. I didn't expect to see you here. Neither did I replied, gesturing for him to sit. We sat in awkward silence for a moment before he spoke. I heard about your promotion. Congratulations. Thanks, I said softly. I heard about everything else. Ben nodded, his eyes fixed on the ground. I deserved it. All of it. I felt a lump form in my throat. Ben, No, Abby, he interrupted. Please, let me say this. What I did to you was unforgivable. And what you did, it opened my eyes. I've been doing a lot of thinking, a lot of therapy. I realize now how much I hurt you, how selfish I was. Tears pricked my eyes. I wanted to hurt you, I whispered. I wanted you to feel the pain I felt. I know, he said, finally meeting my gaze. And I did. I do. But Abby, carrying that anger, that need for revenge, it's poison. For both of us. His words echoed Michael's, and suddenly everything became clear. The emptiness I'd felt wasn't because my revenge wasn't complete. It was because revenge could never fill the void left by betrayal and lost love. I'm sorry, I said, surprised to find I meant it. Not for exposing the truth, but for how I did it, for letting my pain turn me into someone I didn't recognize. Ben nodded, a sad smile on his face. I'm sorry too, for everything. As we sat there watching the last rays of sunlight fade, I felt a weight lift from my shoulders. The anger, the bitterness that had consumed me for so long began to dissipate. What now? Ben asked quietly. I stood up, smoothing down my coat. Now we heal, separately. He nodded, understanding in his eyes. As I walked away, I felt lighter than I had in years. I pulled out my phone and dialed Michael's number. Hey, is that celebration offer still open? His laugh warmed my heart. Always, sis. Come on over. I smiled, quickening my pace. For the first time in a long time, I felt hopeful about the future. I had survived betrayal, navigated the treacherous waters of revenge, and come out stronger on the other side. As I headed towards my brother's house, towards family and love and new beginnings, I realized that true redemption wasn't about making others for their mistakes. It was about finding the strength to forgive others and yourself, and the courage to move forward. My story wasn't over. It was just beginning, and this time I was writing it for myself.
Can you loan me $5? I haven't eaten in 3 days. Mom said, leaving me stunned. What did that mean? I was confused. I will not lend it. No way. Next to me, Jackson, shaking and wide-eyed, erupted in anger. How can you not lend just $5 when she hasn't eaten anything? Jackson calmed down at my words, returning to his usual gentle demeanor. I'm sorry about earlier. What I meant was, I won't be financially supporting Tristan anymore, he explained. I understood where Jackson was coming from. He must have thought it would be strange if Tristan was exploiting Mom. My name is Alyssa. I'm a 55-year-old housewife. I live in a detached house with my husband Jackson, who is 5 years my senior. Our 2 children have grown up and moved out after getting jobs. It's a bit lonely, but Jackson and I are enjoying a peaceful life after parenting. Jackson isn't much of a talker, but he's kind, gentle, and I've never seen him raise his voice. After retiring at 65, Jackson got hired at his old company, commuting about 3 days a week. At my parents' home, Mom and Dad live together. Jackson has an older brother by 3 years, Tristan. Unlike Jackson, Tristan is quick to speak his mind and often becomes emotional. The brothers are complete opposites. Mom's hobby was listening to stand-up comedy on a small boombox. She had a large collection of stand-up comedy tapes and often laughed at them since I was a child. Dad was as kind as Mom, and I barely remember being scolded by him. Dad used to work in a restaurant and was skilled in cooking. I learned a lot about cooking from him. Dad enjoyed cooking steaks for family gatherings at Christmas and the like. I remember Tristan looking up to him, thinking it was cool. Dad often cooked dinner on weekdays. Sitting at the living room table, drinking coffee with Mom, waiting for Dad's cooking, Mom would say with a smile, "It's the opposite of most homes, with Dad busy in the kitchen and me relaxing," which was memorable. Seeing Mom's happy smile, I always thought I wanted to be like them when I got older. Then Dad passed away. He seemed healthy, but was suffering from cancer. His condition worsened rapidly, and Mom hardly had time to grieve. For a while, Mom became like a shell of herself, often zoning out. Worried that she might fall ill from grief, my children kept visiting and encouraging her. Thanks to that, Mom regained her spirits and could live smilingly like before. Around that time, Tristan decided to quit his job and open a pub. Perhaps influenced by my dad, who was a chef, Tristan is easily influenced. Maybe he thought Dad's knife skills were cool. The family opposed his decision to go independent in a not-so-great economic climate. Jackson was against it too. Tristan's selfish nature meant he would likely fail if he went out on his own, we thought. I doubted Tristan's chances of success, focusing only on appearances. Pouring his savings into it and mortgaging his apartment for a loan, Tristan opened the pub, but his arrogance was his downfall. Customers soon stopped coming, and the pub closed within a year. Family relations soured as the business failed, and his wife left him with their children when the pub closed. Tristan lost his family and apartment, leaving him with nothing but debt. Homeless, Tristan turned to my parents' house. While everyone blamed Tristan, only my mom was kind to him. "If you have nowhere to live, you can stay with us," she offered, suggesting they lived together. I was more worried than opposed. I could easily imagine Mom being troubled by Tristan's selfish and headstrong nature. Jackson shared my concerns, but to Tristan, it was as if luck had finally turned his way, and he moved in regardless. Looking back, this kindness would lead to unfortunate outcomes. Tristan, now living at my parents' house like a parasite, spent his days doing nothing in particular, just lazing around. Whenever I visited Mom, he was often lying on the sofa with a beer in one hand and a horse racing newspaper in the other. It seemed Tristan had become entirely too comfortable staying at my parents' home. After a while, Tristan got remarried without consulting or even informing us beforehand. as he began to live with Mom in my childhood home. His new wife, Abigail, was 9 years his junior, known for her flashy makeup and long nails. I met her once. She had a loud voice and was quick to speak her mind. I was worried about how Abigail's assertive personality would mesh with Mom's, wondering if they could get along. Abigail worked at Tristan's favorite bar and shared his interest in horse racing, which is how they got close. Tristan said she showed him how to enjoy life, though his idea of enjoyment was questionable. One rare occasion, Tristan and Abigail visited our home. They were job hunting without success and asked for a loan until they could find employment.
"Could you support us just until I find my next job?"
Tristan asked nonchalantly, legs crossed arrogantly on the sofa. His manner of asking made me doubt whether he was truly in need.
"I've been thinking of starting part-time work too, but it's been hard to find anything."
Abigail's tone was humble, yet something seemed off. I also noticed the expensive brand-name bag Abigail carried, which bothered me. Indeed, Tristan had lost everything after his business failure. That much was true.
"All right, we'll help, but please make an effort to find work."
Jackson must have had his reservations, but decided to support Tristan, his only brother. Like Jackson, I too thought it was best to support Tristan. We decided to provide Tristan and his wife with $2,000 a month for living expenses, money we had saved for our retirement, choosing to give it without mentioning anything. I believed this bad situation wouldn't last forever. Jobs would be found, the need for financial support would end, and they might even start repaying us, I hoped. In hindsight, my optimism was perhaps too great. A year passed without a word from Tristan and his wife. Unable to bear the lack of communication any longer, we decided to visit their home. No answer came from ringing the doorbell for a while, until Abigail finally responded, but only through the door, refusing to open it.
"It's really inconvenient when you just show up without warning. You should at least call ahead. It's rude."
Abigail snapped, not bothering to open the door. Even as I insisted on being let in, she refused.
"We're busy right now,"
was all she would say. That day we left, defeated by Abigail's persistence. What concerned me more than the money was Mom. I would later regret not insisting on entering their home that day. A shocking event occurred just a few days after our visit to Tristan's. That day, a hurricane was passing through, with heavy rain and wind lashing outside. We had closed the shutters early and were hunkered down at home. Deep into the night, startled by the rain and wind hammering at the shutters, the doorbell rang repeatedly.
"Ding dong! Ding dong! Ding dong! Ding dong!"
Wondering what was happening, I decided to check on it, thinking it might be Tristan. Looking through the doorbell monitor, I saw Mom, drenched in the rain. "Alyssa, help me!" Mom pleaded through the doorbell. Rushing to the door, Jackson and I opened it to find Mom soaked, hair a mess from the storm covered in grass and leaves, wearing sandals with her feet full of small cuts. "Can you loan me $5? I haven't eaten in 3 days," Mom said, leaving me stunned. What did that mean? I was confused.
"I will not lend it, no way."
Next to me, Jackson, shivering and wide-eyed, erupted in anger. I was at a loss for words at Jackson's firm refusal. Mom shrank back at Jackson's overly stern tone. She looked like she might collapse at any moment. It was the first time I saw Jackson so angry, raising his voice. I couldn't hold back and retorted to Jackson. "How can you not lend just $5 when she hasn't eaten anything?" Jackson, jolted by my words, returned to his usual calm demeanor. Then, with tears welling up, he let Mom into the house.
"I'm sorry for raising my voice,"
he apologized. Mom entered, looking bewildered, and took a seat on the living room sofa. I handed her a bath towel to prevent a cold, given her drenched state. Taking a good look at Mom again, I saw she had become thin. Her once full hair, now sparse and thin. Her her fingers skeletal. What had happened to Mom? I was filled with questions. Jackson spoke to Mom gently, apologizing again.
I'm sorry about earlier. What I meant was that we won't be financially supporting Tristan anymore.
I understood Jackson's feelings. He probably thought it wouldn't be odd if Tristan was exploiting Mom. But right now, my concern was Mom. Mom, are you okay? Mom remained silent, looking down.
Mother-in-law, how about you stay with us for a while?
Mom stayed silent.
Has Tristan said something to you?
After a long look at Jackson, Mom slowly started to speak. But you are all bothered by me, right? You hate me, don't you? Confused by Mom's inexplicable words, Jackson and I exchanged puzzled looks. Why would she think that? Mom continued, looking at us sternly. You and Jackson have come to hate me. That's what Tristan told me. What are you talking about? That's not true at all. I couldn't help but respond. There's no way we would hate our beloved Mom. Mom began to cry, sobbing. We've always loved you, Mom. There's no way we can hate you. We've missed you so much. I embraced Mom without hesitation. Mom hugged me back and started crying loudly. She talked about trying to leave the house in the middle of the night like a sleepwalker, wanting to see me. Since then, she was tied to the bed, unable to move. Not allowed to go to the bathroom. She was left with diapers by the bed. She was only untied for using the toilet, eating, and doing house chores. Mom's meals were limited to oatmeal, only twice a day. Tristan and Abigail constantly fed her lies about Jackson and me, claiming we had abandoned her, always hated her, piling up falsehoods. They would leave Mom restrained and not return, leaving her without food for 3 days. Unable to shower or use the toilet, she was forced to rely on diapers. Believing her life was at risk, Mom managed to free herself and escape. Hearing the shocking extent of her suffering, we were speechless. Such cruelty was beyond human. Were Tristan and his wife devils? All I felt was immense pity for Mom. Considering the distance, it would take an hour on foot under normal circumstances. Much longer for Mom, especially during a hurricane. The thought of her struggle to reach us brought me to tears.
Don't worry, from now on, we'll protect you.
Mom nodded repeatedly to these words, relieved. So what was all that Tristan and Abigail told you?
It turns out everything they said was a lie.
Mom looked shocked, never having doubted others or experienced such malice. A series of unbelievable events for Mom.
Probably Tristan was counting on living here and targeting your old age pension.
But don't worry, we'll take care of you, Mom. Mom, reassured by those words, smiled warmly. I made clam chowder for Mom, Dad's specialty. Mom murmured nostalgically. It brings back memories. Savoring it, Jackson, tears in his eyes, muttered to himself while looking at Mom.
I'll never forgive Tristan and the others for putting you through this.
When I asked Mom where Tristan and the others were, she mentioned they went to Kentucky for horse racing. It seems there's a big race tomorrow, so they probably won't return until then. Jackson and I began plotting our retaliation. The next morning, I prepared Dad's recipes for breakfast for Mom. Mom, who had lost her appetite, ate only a little, but commented, It's been a long time since I've had something this delicious. Seeing Mom eat with a smile made my heart ache even more. How could someone as kind and unsuspecting as Mom have gone through such hardship? After finishing her meal, Mom quietly started to speak. They said they didn't like my attitude. Too pretentious. They kicked me. I gasped in shock. How could anyone do something so terrible? My heart ached with sorrow for what Mom had endured, and tears spilled over. Mom tenderly wiped away my tears. Alyssa, I'm sorry for bringing this up. Mom looked down, apologetic. Mom, it's not your fault. We'll protect you from now on. You won't have to go through this ever again. Mom looked at me with a smile. I returned the smile to Mom. After breakfast and calming down, I took Mom, who had showered, to the hospital. The diagnosis revealed severe malnutrition and dehydration. Given her age, hospitalization was advised, so Mom was admitted for a few days. No other illnesses were found, and she could be discharged soon once her nutrition improved. However, the doctor, after examining Mom, asked about her living situation in a stern tone. I detailed the circumstances Mom was in. The doctor suspected I might be abusing her. After my explanation cleared up the misunderstanding, the doctor smiled and said they would contact social services. Abuse was strongly suspected. This was exactly what I had hoped for, so I readily agreed. Soon, a social service agent arrived and discussed Mom's diet, confinement, and the violence she suffered. Mom's body had bruises all over. The agent, shocked by the severity, said they would consult with the police. Watching Mom sleep peacefully, I regretted not noticing sooner and visiting her. My tears streaming down my face. Mom, I promise we won't forgive them. They will pay for this. I gripped my mom's frail hand tightly. Mom woke up and smiled at me. When you go to my house, please bring the boombox and the stand-up comedy tapes, all of them. Those were Mom's favorites. I nodded firmly. The next morning, Jackson and I headed to Tristan's family home. My anger surpassed my sadness. But Jackson was even angrier than I was. We thought no one was home when our doorbell presses went unanswered, so we were about to leave when a sleepy voice finally responded. Knowing Tristan and the others were inside, we used the key we had to open the front door and entered. Abigail, surprised to see us in the living room. "What are you two doing here all of a sudden?" exclaimed. When I confronted Abigail with, "What's wrong with the children visiting their parents' home?" she hesitated, saying, "Well, it's not that, but..." trailing off. Looking around the house, it was overflowing with trash, and the smell of rotten food hit my nose. The floor felt sticky.
Such a mess. When do you ever clean up?
Jackson asked in astonishment. Tristan, lying on the sofa, clicked his tongue at us.
That old lady doesn't clean up.
Tristan mumbled, to which Jackson sharply responded,
"Hey, you had mother-in-law take care of even the trash."
Jackson glared at him with piercing eyes. Tristan covered his mouth, realizing his mistake, and left the living room. Jackson hurled words at Tristan as he walked away.
"Your breath smells like alcohol. Have you been drinking all night?"
I took another look at Abigail. Abigail's hair was disheveled. Her shirt was stretched out at the neck, revealing her undershirt. Her makeup seemed not fully removed, with black smudges around her eyes. Noticing my scrutinizing gaze, Abigail, perhaps embarrassed, looked down with a sour expression.
"When you visit someone's house, it's common courtesy to call ahead. It's annoying otherwise."
Abigail picked up a barely smoked cigarette from the ashtray and lit it. "So your idea of normal is sleeping past noon without cleaning?" Abigail was at a loss for words. As Abigail struggled to respond, Tristan came back shouting loudly,
"Hey, where'd that old lady go?"
He must have just realized the bed was empty. "We're taking care of her. She was in such bad shape nutritionally that we had her admitted to the hospital. A little later, and it could have been life-threatening." I exaggerated a bit about Mom's condition. Tristan glared at Abigail.
"That's what I said. You went too far."
Abigail, fed up, retorted to Tristan.
You're the one who said to tie her up because she's noisy at night.
Besides, it's her fault for not helping out around the house, even though we feed her.
Listening to them start insulting each other, I felt an unbearable anger. Mom hadn't eaten for 3 days, and she had no money at all. It's too much. It can't be helped. Tristan doesn't work, so we have no income. We're saving money. Yet Tristan and Abigail looked well-fed and had healthy complexions with fat around their bellies. Despite that, you two are fat and look healthy.
And where have you been these past few days?
Wherever we want to be. Abigail turned sullen and evasive. Jackson picked up a horse racing newspaper nearby and threw it at Tristan.
You were at the horse races in Kentucky. We already know.
Tristan scratched his head, looking uncomfortable.
Well, that's,
Seeing Tristan and Abigail's unrepentant, parasitic way of life, stealing from others, filled me with anger and tears. While Mom was wasting away, you two didn't work, living off the money we sent and Mom's old age pension, going out and about. Jackson, too, must have been furious, raising his voice to denounce Tristan.
You didn't even provide mother-in-law with proper meals, tying her to the bed at night.
According to Mom, Tristan and Abigail had been living a slothful life, squandering the money Jackson sent and Mom's old age pension on drinking, gambling at horse races and casinos. Where's your proof? The old lady must be making it all up. Abigail came at us aggressively. Is this Abigail's true nature? Reluctantly, I decided to present the evidence. I brought the boombox Mom cherished from the bed she had been sleeping in to the living room. In the living room, I inserted a stand-up comedy cassette tape into the boombox.
Why? How does stand-up comedy prove anything? Gonna teach us a lesson, comedian?
Tristan and Abigail looked at me with a sneering smile. I pressed the play button regardless.
Just tie her up. We're going to make a killing at the horse races in Kentucky, so behave.
See, if you don't behave, you'll hurt like last time.
When we get back, tell us where the banking card and seal are.
Really? Can't find it anywhere. Where did you hide it?
What came out of the boombox wasn't stand-up comedy, but an audio recording of Tristan and Abigail abusing Mom. Mom had recorded the abuse over the stand-up comedy tapes. That's why she wanted them brought to her. Hearing this recording, Tristan and Abigail collapsed to their knees, as if all strength had left them. Was this what Tristan called the joy of life? Mom has become so thin, almost just skin and bones, all because of you two.
We don't know anything about that.
Abigail shouted back at us loudly. As Jackson and I looked down on Tristan and Abigail, the doorbell rang.
Ding dong!
They're here. I headed to the door. I returned to the living room with the police and a social services officer. Faced with the unexpected visitors, Tristan and Abigail looked shocked. The social services officer showed Tristan and Abigail the hospital's diagnostic report and the doctor's opinion. The police went to check the bed. You've committed a serious crime. You'll be paying for it from now on.
Let the police thoroughly investigate and see for yourself how terrible the things you've done are.
We also handed over the cassette tape that recorded the abuse to the police. Tristan and Abigail will be judged for their crimes accordingly. Jackson spoke to Tristan.
We won't be sending money anymore. We're cutting ties with you.
This house belongs to Mom. We're going to sell it. Don't come back here. Suddenly, Tristan bowed deeply. Perhaps he finally realized his situation.
Alyssa, if we lose this house, we'll have nowhere to live. I'll really look for a job this time. Please forgive us.
Abigail also bowed deeply.
I'll take care of mother-in-law too. Please forgive us.
Now that they found themselves in a desperate situation, their attitude became completely opposite, calmly apologizing. It's too late. We can't trust you two anymore.
Please, just this once, forgive us. This one time.
How long will they keep saying just this time? Do they think we'll relent? You will pay for your crimes no matter what. Don't ever contact us again. Jackson pulled out a debit card from the box containing the cassette tapes.
Is this what you were desperately looking for?
The debit card contained the money Dad and Mom had saved diligently and Dad's life insurance. I pulled the debit card out from between the boombox and showed it to Tristan and Abigail.
So it was there all along.
If only we had that. Wow.
Tristan and Abigail began to cry out loudly. Even as the police took Tristan and Abigail away, they continued to insult each other. A futile effort till the end. They were crying and wailing as they were forced into the police car and taken away. The evidence against Tristan and Abigail included not just the audio recording of abuse, but also the restraints found on the bed. Additionally, the loud yelling of Tristan at night and Abigail's shrill screams, as reported by neighbors, served as testimony to the abuse. Further investigation revealed that a substantial life insurance policy had been taken out on Mom, leading to intense interrogations day after day. The police, calling it an inquiry, informed me of this. They were likely to be found guilty and face a severe sentence. Tristan and Abigail would be spending some time in prison. I hope they reflect on their crimes and make amends. We are seeking damages from Tristan and Abigail. After their release, they will have to make payments for the rest of their lives. I told Jackson I wanted to live with Mom. He gladly agreed.
Yeah, let's live with mother-in-law.
We decided to consult with Mom and use the money from selling the house for renovations. Although Mom, Jackson, and I are getting on in years, it's the start of a new chapter in our lives. It feels exciting. Mom seems excited too, smiling as she says, "A bigger kitchen would be nice," discussing the house layout with the architect. Our peaceful days continued until our eldest son's wife announced her pregnancy. She wants to raise the child at home after giving birth. Her parents are on an overseas assignment, so they've turned to us for support. For me, it's my first grandchild, and for Mom, her first great-grandchild. So our quiet days will be put on hold for a while as we embark on these busy days ahead. Someday, I want to ask Mom, do you think Jackson and I have become a couple like you and Dad?
Yeah, I'll do what I want to do. You don't have to tell me to do. Huh.
Even though I didn't ask, John began to talk about her incessantly.
She never told me she was pregnant. Was she considerate of my marriage?
Then how did you find out she was pregnant?
I happened to find an echo picture in her bag. She probably intended to give birth alone out of consideration for me. What a courageous woman.
Completely smitten with Kathy, John was determined to divorce me as soon as possible and proposed to her. He even prepared the divorce papers. If that's what John wants, it's actually convenient for me. I'm tired of seeing his face too. John signed the divorce paper with satisfaction and immediately submitted them to the court. After he was gone, I quickly packed my stuff and headed for my parents' house. And so, my married life with John ended just like that, I thought. The call from John to my mobile phone came the next night.
Lily, where are you now?
Where? I'm at my parents' house. What's wrong?
At your parents'. I see. Can you come by to the nearby diner right now? I have something important to talk about.
Why don't you come here if you have something to talk about?
I can't do that. Please come. It's a request for a lifetime.
Reluctantly, I headed to the designated diner. There was John, who had completely lost his energy. As soon as he saw my face, he said,
Lily, get back together with me.
What? I got stunned, but John began to speak, painfully.
Actually, she turned down my proposal.
I swallowed the words. I knew it.
She had a fiancé that her parents had arranged. From the beginning, I was just a game to her.
Yeah, I know.
Also, the child in her stomach wasn't mine.
I had suspected that from the moment I heard she was pregnant. It was a well-known story in our company that Kathy was engaged to a rich man from another company. When I found out that Kathy was John's mistress, I tried to tell John about it, but before I could, John quickly dumped me and tried to switch to Kathy. There was no obligation to kindly tell him the truth. Knowing this would happen,
I kept silent all along. Kathy chose me as a playmate because I'm a married man, thinking there would be no strings attached. When I told her I divorced my wife, she coldly brushed me off, saying, "Are you an idiot?" I don't feel sorry for John, who was depressed. He brought it on himself. Well, you can't compare to a rich young man, can you? Then John looked at me in surprise. How did you know that Kathy's fiancé is a rich young man? I told John that Kathy is the daughter of our company's client. No one in the company doesn't know that Kathy is engaged to a rich young man. I never dreamed that you and Kathy were having an affair. You knew? Why didn't you tell me? I was going to tell you when I noticed you were having an affair with Kathy, but before I could, you told me to get out. Was that the important talk at that time? That's why I asked. Don't you regret it? You scoffed at me and answered, I don't. Remember? So I was relieved and able to easily tell my family the reason for the divorce. Huh. Did you tell this to your father, too? Of course I did. What have you done? It's not too late yet. Take back what you said. Tell him it was a mistake. Don't be foolish. It's too late. Dad is furious. Well, you don't care what my dad thinks about you now. That's not true. I'm telling you, I want to make amends. It's too late. I have no intention of starting over with you. I refuse to be with a man like you, who changes his marriage partner based on his parents' title. But, besides, your true nature is already exposed to my father. I've told him everything, including when you said, I can quit my current job anytime. Is that a lie? Actually, my father said, if so, I don't mind if he resigns right away. But I thought I could get into Kathy's company at that time. Haha, you're full of regrets. I told you to listen to my advice. I really regret it. So, could you give me another chance? Looking at John begging for another opportunity, I coldly declared, there are no more chances. It's your responsibility to take charge of what you've done. I added more fuel to the fire while John was feeling down. Oh, by the way, I finished reporting to my parents, so please, leave our house soon. What? You've been telling me to get out, but that house is what my father bought for me. The title should be in my name. Wait, I'm in trouble if you tell me to leave. Either way, you're going to move out soon, so what's the big deal? What do you mean? Let me see, you haven't been informed yet. You are being removed from your post in New York. What did you say? You're being relocated to a remote area. At least be grateful that they didn't fire you. My father, who was furious about my divorce, took a quick action. He immediately arranged for John to be transferred to a remote area far from New York. It was also a well-known department for layoff candidates. That's a mix of private and public issues. That's not true. Of course, my father was angry about our divorce, but the reason he removed you from the career track is for another reason. You don't have company loyalty or personal integrity. My father calmly judged that such a person should not be in the upper management of the company. You don't mind if your husband is driven to such a remote area? Ex-husband. You and I are strangers now. Lily, don't say such cold things. Aren't you getting lonely on your own? Huh? How naive can you be? You've been saying that you've been putting up with our married life, but it's the same for me. I've been turning a blind eye to your verbal abuse and affairs because I didn't want my father to be sad. I feel refreshed now that I'm released from that. Lily, don't say that. Help me. Shut up. Do your best in your unwanted duties in the remote area. I left my seat without listening to his words, and I left the diner without looking back once. I was wondering why I had been with such an insincere and pathetic man until now. Afterwards, I got help from a lawyer introduced by my father and got division of property. John, who wanted to hang on to the company somehow, paid the full amount immediately by using up his savings. I was grateful that I quickly received what I could get and completely cut ties with John. He, who had his savings depleted by the payment of damages, seems to be leading a rather simple life in the remote area. The most successful young person? That was a thing of the past. There's no trace of him now, and he seems to have aged all at once. On the other hand, I have been living a leisurely life since I broke up with John. When my previous company found out that I was divorced, they asked me, "We really want you to come back." They recognized me, not because of my father's connections. I was moved by that and decided to return to work. I've always liked my job, so I had no hesitation about going back. Perhaps because my father feels guilty about introducing me to a good-for-nothing man, He keeps bringing me potential suitors, but I'm turning them all down. If a good person appears someday, I might feel like getting married. But for now, I just want to enjoy this fulfilling single life a little longer. I returned to work and worked hard, so I have plenty of money. The life of enjoying both work and private life to the fullest seems to continue for a while.